Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Yoder-Shetler, founder of the Facebook activism group Be the Bear. We started last year as a way to consolidate and step into our power to focus on Kamala Harris's campaign. And now in this year, we're focusing on Kansas state races and really focusing our efforts on supporting the leaders who deserve leadership, who show up for us, and who will get us to a better current moment and build a better future for us here in Kansas. So one of those leaders I am so thrilled to introduce is Cindy Holscher. Cindy, you are running for governor, and we're so thrilled that you stepped into the race. But first, I want to hear a little bit about your origin story. Where did you grow up?
No, well, thank you so much, Rebecca. It's a pleasure to be here with you and just appreciate everything you and everybody else with the Be the Bear group has done in terms of motivating and inspiring people to take action, because that's what it's all about. To your question, where did I grow up? I've been in the Midwest my entire life. I grew up on a farm in mid-Missouri. I'm the granddaughter of tenant farmers, the poorest of the poor. I come from a blue-collar union family, a military family. But once I became an adult, I came to Kansas because this state has historically done a great job of investing in communities as well as our schools. And also, the appeal of being in the free state and being on the right side of history was a big motivator. So I have now lived in Kansas for 25 years. And while I'm a Missourian by birth, I'm a Kansan by choice.
I identify with that so much because I grew up on farms in Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
On my dad's side, there has never been a generation that didn't farm since we came to the US soon after the Mayflower, fleeing religious
Oh, wow.
persecution in Europe. So there's something about the work ethic and the pragmatism and practicality and grit of farmers that I resonate with. So it makes sense that I found it very easy to connect with you and
Yeah.
your approach to leadership. I love that. So in that theme, who can you point to one person in your life who's taught you the most about leadership and kind of shaped who you are as a leader and like given you something, an example to follow in this journey toward leadership yourself?
Yeah. I can't narrow it to one person, but I can narrow it to one profession,
Okay.
educators.
Mm-hmm.
It's educators who have made a difference for me. And honestly, I am probably the best poster child for what a difference public education can make in the life of a person and of a child. I had so many inspiring teachers in K through 12, and then that continued in college, where I would say, professors and teachers saw something special in me and motivated me and inspired me to, move beyond any imagined parameters or boundaries. So, public education as well as a good union job is what helped my family rise up out of poverty. And that's why I fight so hard just for everybody out there to have a shot at the American dream.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I definitely feel like teachers and educators change the world. They're the ones shaping reality, right? Because we co-create our reality. And when children are taught to believe in themselves and when they're given the skills to bring their gifts to the world, that literally creates the next generation of reality makers. So
Yeah,
thank you for that focus.
absolutely.
Um, did you spend time in education yourself?
Not initially. I actually have a background in marketing and
Okay.
spent several years in marketing as well as designing and implementing budgets. Very, very much connected to the job of governor and creating jobs. So, like I said, a lot of points there that are very much in line with the job of being governor. In terms of teaching, gosh, after COVID, I went out and got my sub license. And
Nice.
at that point, I was in the legislature, but we're only in session from January to May. And so we were experiencing such a severe teacher shortage at that point. I couldn't stand to see friends of mine who were teaching covering 2 and 3 classes.
Yeah.
And so I decided, okay, there are things I can do in the legislature to make a difference, but there are things I can do in my community to make a difference. So I went and got my sub license, and the intent was to, maybe do 2 or 3 days when we're not in session. I ended up doing 5 days a week because there was such a huge need, and I couldn't say no because I was seeing teachers working so hard to, pour so much into our students. So, like I said, I ended up, subbing 4 and 5 days a week. And my big piece of advice is stay away from fourth graders.
As a parent of a fourth grader right now, yes. my my child is a very like contemplative sort of person, and I think that
Yeah.
that saves us from some things. Fourth graders are very interesting and wild individuals.
They make a lot of decisions without thinking about it.
Right. They're old enough to think of themselves. Like they have better self-knowledge and what do I want, but
Yeah.
their decision making isn't finished
It's
baking.
just not there. So
I
yeah, I
love
end
that.
up if I do a fourth grade class, I end up coming home and kind of rubbing my temples for a little while, and it's all good though. They're good kids.
I love that. That practicality of where can I help seems to be a common theme for you. And I love how last week in the group, when I shared a candidate focus and promoted you, people jumped in the comments with stories about how you practically showed up for them. And it was my favorite thing. I feel like I learned so much about you. One person shared how when they were first running for office, they had a 3-year-old child and they took them along to the event where they were supposed to give a stump speech, and they felt very pretty like scattered and unprepared because they didn't quite know what to expect. And their child wasn't really wanting to let them take that moment for themselves and was kind of wiggly and distracting,
Yeah.
and that you took that child and went around back in the backyard to the trampoline that was there just where the event was being held and entertained their child for them so that they could give their stump speech and kind of give them the space to launch their own leadership, political leadership career. Which I love that. Just noticing what needs to be done, stepping in and doing it, and not being too good for it at the same time as like seeing the humanity of that child and what they needed. I love that story about you. Someone else said that there was a time when they had rescued, I think, some baby coons and didn't
Oh,
know
so
what to
they
do with
got
them.
yeah.
And and you like took the baby coons from them and like kept them alive until they could find a place to foster them. I just love those, like they might kind of seem like side quests, right? But along with like the subbing, just like in this moment, where is the greatest need? Or like this need came to me, what needs to be done? I can offer my skills here. And I don't think those are side quests. I think that is the heart of who you are and who you are as a leader, which is saying something because pragmatic leaders can solve real problems very, very well. So
Well, and I
good
think that's at
effort.
the heart of it. What can I do to fix things? If there's a problem, I'm going to try to do what I can to fix it. And I will tell you, Sammy's one of my best friends. She was
Aw,
free at the time,
I
but
love that.
she's always
That
going
you
to be my
stayed in touch.
BFF.
I love that so much. So let's talk about your own start of your own political
Mhm.
career. What kind of was the catalyst for that? Was it a single instance or was it a journey for you? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so I took a few years off from work to stay home with the kids. At the point when my youngest was born, I had 3 children under the age of 4, and it was pretty busy here. So decided to take a few years off with them. And during that point, well, let me back up here. We decided we wanted to be in Kansas for our family, to raise a family because of the great schools and the great communities. Of course, about the time our kids got into K through 12 and well, when they got into elementary school, the Brownback experiment was happening. And for those who may not know, the Brownback experiment was a tax plan that was pushed that gave huge benefits to the wealthy at the sacrifice of our schools, our infrastructure, and our roads, and everything else, and all of our important agencies. So like I said, my kids were in school at that point when the Brownback experiment was going on. And at that time, I was volunteering in the schools and leading the PTA. And I was seeing what was happening with these drastic cuts. We were losing teachers. We didn't have supplies. Some of our classrooms had shower curtains for doors. I mean,
Wow.
this was drastic. Um, and everything was just spiraling downward, it felt like. And then one weekend, my daughter Sarah and I went to Target, and we just went there on a weekend, just to pick up a few supplies. And when we got there, one of her teachers was working. And my daughter, she was
Wow.
12 at the time, and she looked at me and she said, "Why is my teacher working at Target on the weekend after being at school all week long working hard?" And I told her, I said, we're in the middle of this budget crisis. I said, she probably doesn't make enough money to pay her bills. And I kid you not, she looked at me and she said, "You go fix that. That's
Wow.
wrong." And I
Mhm.
stood there in that moment thinking, she's right. Um, we're in a crisis, and it's going to take reasonable people stepping forward to fix things. And as it was at that time, my own representative was leading the charge in defunding our schools. So that seemed like a good place to start, honestly.
Yep.
Um, and I will tell you this, as I started kind of thinking about running for office, a lot of people in power, the establishment, told me not to do it. They said I
Mhm.
wasn't connected to the right people, that I didn't have, the right connections. And I'm not connected to DC elitist or wealthy folks. I'm from the people. And by that, I'm very connected to the people. And I told them, I said,
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure I can win this race. So I started knocking doors, started raising money. And not only did I win that race in a red district, I defeated a three-term Republican incumbent and won every single precinct. So, some determination, persistence, and drive made a big difference. So, like I said, I started in the House. That was my first election in 2016, then crossed over to the Senate in 2020. And all because of something my daughter told me in Target.
I love that. I love that. Just seeing the need and saying, I think I could make a difference with
Yeah.
what I have. Um, so what advice would you give to someone else who might be in their community in the moment and is might be either telling themselves or hearing the same messaging of you're not the person to fix this. You don't know enough about the political world, um, but they still might feel that pull to I could be the person to fix this. What's your best advice?
Right now, if you're questioning and you're asking yourself those questions and thinking about, chances are really good you are qualified because
Mm.
you're already examining and thinking about, and using some critical thinking to assess the situation. And here's something else I know, from experience in the business world. When it comes to hiring, or a male versus a female thinks about applying for a job, a female tends to take the perspective of they have to check every box in terms of what's required in qualifications. And we
Right.
limit ourselves because of that, thinking, okay, if I can't check the box by every single one of these needs or qualifications, I'm not qualified. However, research shows that a male will apply for a job even if he maybe checks a box on less than 50% of those things. So
Mm.
sometimes I think we hold ourselves back as females. And I can tell you this, from the past 9 years in the legislature, like I said, females, you are absolutely qualified from your life experience, from the work you've done, from raising children. There are so many things there that give you, the knowledge that you need and the inspiration to enter politics and be a leader.
So count yourself in, huh?
Count yourself in.
Love that. What are you most proud of? When you look back on your political career so far, is there a specific piece of legislation or a coalition you participated in or built? What are you most proud of in your political career so far?
Well, there's a couple things. When I first entered office in the legislature, we were, facing the Brownback experiment and the devastation that was affecting our state. So early on, I went ahead and reached out to a peer across the aisle, and we formed together the Women's Bipartisan Caucus
Mm.
because, we had this big issue to fix. And unfortunately, some of the people in leadership were backing into their corners, and they weren't talking and they weren't solving the problem. So, like I said, that's when I reached across the aisle, and we formed the Women's Bipartisan Caucus. And we started meeting a few times a week, started talking about what the problem was. We brought in flip charts and dry erase boards and did pure collaboration in terms of working through the problem. And through that, we put together the bill that ended the Brownback experiment. And
Yes.
I look back at that, and at the time, I was like, okay, we just got to get this done. you know
Mhm. Right.
and we attacked the plan, and developed the bill. Now I look back at it and think, yeah, that was a lot of navigating, and a lot of processing and collaboration, but we did it in such a way that we were able to get people on board. And you had to reach that critical mass in terms of a huge number of people coming in agreement on a bill,
Yeah.
because we had to override Brownback's veto. So that means two-thirds majority. So
Mm.
yeah, it was quite the process. And I'm so proud of the women, that were part of that group, and then the men that came on later, to make sure that we got this done. And you look back at that, it's like, okay, that's how it's supposed to be. You know,
Yes.
that's
100%.
that's that's how government's supposed to work. So, like I said, there was, ending the Brownback experiment. I will tell you though, there's another bill. I worked on statute of limitations reform for victims of sexual violence. And this one was a 4-year process. So the importance of persistence very much shows through on this. And this was the result of the bill. Well, the bill came forward because of what was happening in KCK. A corrupt police detective was violating minority women in their neighborhoods. And
I remember that.
because of the very narrow statute of limitations, sometimes 5 years, sometimes 10, depending on the classification of the crime, these women didn't have time to bring their cases forward.
Mm.
And, that meant they weren't able to seek justice. And that meant a perpetrator was on the street continuing to violate other women. So I first started working on this bill in the House, introduced it, and there weren't a whole lot of people on board. There were a few, but it's a very sensitive topic.
Yeah.
People didn't want to deal with it,
Mm.
because of the sensitivity, but it needed to be fixed. So I stuck with it, crossed over to the Senate then, brought the bill back. We had some wonderful survivors come forward who testified, in support of the bill and why it was needed. And after 4 years, got that bill passed in the House and the Senate unanimously. And,
Unanimously.
yeah,
Wow.
and, the importance there is this bill moving forward allows women to pursue justice in the time frame, that is workable for them, because it often takes decades before someone is able to come forward in terms of being sexually violated. So it allows women to pursue justice in the time frame that works for them, and it gets predators off our streets. So, like I said, that's another bill that I'm extremely proud of and the impact it's had.
Yeah, you should be. Um, I'm thinking of the other women who collaborated with you for both of those high points, and both of those high points have been incredibly impactful, in such a positive way for our state. Back to the ending the Brownback experiment, I
Mhm.
remember when that happened very vividly. I had just I'd been in Kansas a few years, so I moved here from Pennsylvania 12 years ago.
Okay.
And so I was fairly new, and I was watching our roads not be maintained. Like there was a
Right.
stark fall off. And I had friends who were teachers, and suddenly they were not being paid.
Yep.
And I had friends who had kids in school, and the school year ended early because we didn't have funds. And I was like, what is this place? What is happening? Um, and then Patsy Terrell, who was in
Oh,
the
yes.
community where I have lived ever since I moved here from Pennsylvania in the Hutchinson area. I'm west of Hutch. I'm extremely rural, but Hutchinson is our biggest town. So that's where I'm deeply involved. And Patsy was just beginning her campaign.
Mhm.
And I had started going to some community events, and she sought me out. I honestly, looking back, I think about this might be a bunny trail, but I was like, I love Patsy so much, and she's so beloved. So I kind of want to hear some of your connections and stories around that time, and both her and other women that you worked with alongside in both of these efforts. But she was the kind of person who saw something in people and affirmed it wherever she could. Looking back, I was still very new to stepping into my own confidence as a leader and as
Mhm.
a like making a difference in my community. And she sent me a Facebook message. I remember we were on a trip and it was the week before she passed. She sent me a Facebook message and she said, I'd done some local organizing around like the bill that y'all were introducing to end the
Mhm.
Brownback experiment and having people call their senators. Like I was very new into like, oh, here's how I can help. And
Right.
she sent me a Facebook message and she said, you stand out to me as someone who, as you
Mhm.
step into your gifts, are going to change things. And I was like, I met her only a few times. I had friends who were good friends with her, but like I didn't feel like her ability to see people and to see things so clearly reached me in a time when I wasn't super visible yet. So knowing that you worked with her also makes me feel very connected to you, and I
Oh,
love that. Do you have any Patsy stories or stories of other women that you have collaborated with along these?
yes, and thank you for asking about Patsy. I actually sat next to her on the house floor, so
Wow.
we were quite close. And here's something. I'm so glad you asked this because this is very important. We were elected that we came into the House at the same time. Um, and very quickly, we noticed other people who had just come in to the legislature were starting to make deals. Like, we were called here to end the Brownback experiment and do good things
Yeah.
for our state and our people. And then we started seeing, like I said, people making deals on bills
Mm.
and making trades. And here's what I'm talking about. Like, somebody would be asked by leadership, hey, will you trade your vote on this bill? I know you're against it, but will you vote yes? And I'll give you a hearing on your bill or, give you a chair role of a committee. And like I said, we started noticing this happening fairly quickly. And Patsy looked at me and she said to me, she goes, if you ever see me start making deals like that, she's like, you just shake me until I come back and wake up. And I told her, I
Mm.
said, and you do the same for me because
Wow.
that's not why we're there. We're not there for our self-interest or, our
Yeah.
needs or our wants in terms of being a committee chair. We are there to serve the people and vote in lines of the people. So, like I said, that was a pact we made
Wow.
that first session. And you know what? I have held true to that. I don't make trades on bills. And it's not just Republicans. There are Democrats who make trades on bills. I will not do that. My litmus test is this. If it's good for the people, I'm going to support it. If it's not, then I won't. And that's why we're there. So
Yeah.
I'm just so thankful that I knew her. And you know what? She came and did what she felt compelled to do. She
Yeah.
was there helping us in the Brownback experiment.
Yeah.
And, what a loss. I mean, she passed
Yeah.
away that night after
Yeah.
we
She did.
passed the bill. And oh my gosh, like I said, you know, she did what she came to do.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. And I'm just, like I said, I'm so glad that I knew her.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
I know many of the people in our group were connected to Patsy in some way if they were in Central Kansas because she was just that kind of person.
Oh, yeah.
So thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah.
Um, okay, in t along the lines of the tenacity you talked about, what is your why that keeps you determined when things are hard? Because, like you said, some of these things take years to accomplish that you might be passionate about, and there are obstacles thrown in your way, and people don't get on board. My favorite and least favorite thing about leadership is you have to work with people, and people are fickle, and things shift all the time, and it can be very daunting. And so, what is your why that you hold on to that keeps you pushing forward?
Yeah, well, I thank you for that question because I would tell you this, it can be exhausting
Yeah,
being in the super minority when you have this huge group of extremists who don't believe in science or facts. And like I said, that can be pretty daunting. But sometimes it does, it kind of makes me, I joke to people, I say, sometimes I question my life choices and, why am I doing this in this environment? But then something goes through my mind and makes me realize why I'm there. And here's what it is. Often on some of the very worst bills, one vote in the legislature has made a difference.
Mm.
One vote between a very bad bill moving forward and becoming law or stopping it. And I start to
Mm.
think about, people like Amanda Grossroad or Jim Denning. Those were the people that I challenged for their seats and they're no longer there. If I hadn't done that, all of those bills would have made it to the finish line and we'd be in a very different situation. We probably would have lost our schools. We rights and those different things. We'd be some under a tax plan probably just about as bad as the Brownback experiment. So, like I said, that one vote has made a huge difference. And at the same time, we've been able to stop some bills, but at the same time, I've been able to implement some bills that have been very impactful to Kansans. And, the statute of limitations reform, I brought the purple alert system to Kansas, helped in
Mm.
the Brownback experiment. And additionally, I've helped lead efforts on implementing tax breaks for families to make life more affordable. That's always a focus of mine and why I run. And additionally, I've been told I'm the most successful Democrat in terms of getting bills passed that I've introduced. And
Wow.
like I said, these have been some pretty impactful bills. And the other thing that, that goes through my mind in terms of why I'm there, my kids are done with school. My youngest has graduated. He's moved on to college. So, a lot of people then are of the standpoint, well, I can move on. I got what I needed. That's not where I am. I want
Mm.
every child in Kansas to have access to a strong education. And it's a very small group of us there right now pushing back against vouchers that defund our schools.
Mm.
And the future for our children is so important to make sure they have a solid education so that they have opportunities. And so, like I said, every year we have these voucher plans that are introduced that are meant to defund our schools. Over the past few years, I've been able to establish an alliance, a network of people across the state to push back against those voucher efforts. And I'm happy to say last year, this small group of us, we stopped every single voucher plan that was introduced in the session.
Wow.
Um, and it's just so important to me that we ensure that children have access to a good education.
It sounds like being up against big odds has kind of taught you your own personal value, the difference that one person can make. That's
Oh,
very
absolutely.
inspiring. I love that. Okay. So, as looking to the future, as our governor, we're going to name
Yes.
it and claim it, folks. As our governor, what will be your primary focus? So, things can change and shift so much during the year. And so this, of course, subject to change, right? Depending on what happens between now and then. But as things stand now, as you look to the future, where do you see Kansas in most of change in need of change? And how do you think we get there?
Yeah. My primary focus is making Kansas more affordable for the has affordable housing crisis, affordable childcare crisis. We lack access to affordable health care. Those are huge issues that we have to address. And we've been so hampered by this extremist legislature that has been focused on tax breaks for the wealthy and these culture wars and ignoring the problems that are out there that we need to solve. I mean, the system's been rigged against us, and we have to take action to move forward in a different direction. There continues to be work done to protect our public schools from that ongoing assault by the voucher crowd. And we have to ensure that we are funding both general education as well as special education. So again, it comes down, to me, to making sure life is affordable to all of our citizens and that everyone has access to a solid education and opportunity so that we all have our shot at the American dream.
Preach. So before I ask the final question, I'm going to do a fun one. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, one superpower. Oh, to make sure that all of my peers had empathy,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
because that has been the toughest thing. Um, to see that there are people out there that really don't think beyond their own circle and really don't think so much about other people and their needs. So, yeah, I had the magic wand because I think we'd be in much, much better shape.
Magic empathy wand. I love
Yes.
it.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
now can care about people.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, final question. How can members of Be the Bear best support your campaign?
Oh gosh. Okay, campaigns are expensive. So, we need people who are willing to donate. We need people who are willing to volunteer. This is very grassroots, just like every campaign of mine has been. It comes from the people. I'm not associated with those dark money special interest groups. Again, every election I've won has been because of the people who have donated to my campaign and help. And you can reach out to us through cindyforkansas.com, the website. There's information there in terms of contacting us. I have found out half the state seems to have my phone number, so you can text me too or reach out, and you can always email me. Because here's what I will tell you, we are definitely in the most concerning time period of our lives, and we feel that. Democracy, our rights, our people are literally under assault. And while it may feel overwhelming at times, history has shown us that we can stop this far right fascist movement together. And it's done through lawful resistance, building broad coalitions, and pulling those levers of democracy relentlessly. And, this is what goes through my mind too. With tomorrow being MLK Day, I'm reminded of his famous quote: the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. But it doesn't bend on its own. It only bends when we, the people, take action, and often females pull it towards justice. So I ask you to join in this effort with me to save our state, to save our country, and save our democracy. Let's bend the arc.
Let's do it.
Let's freaking go.
Yes. And we have to have a moment for the Kamala Harris mug. I love it. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you for your leadership thus far. Thank you for this conversation and making time on a Sunday to have it with me. We appreciate you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate you so much. And yeah, let's get this done.
Let's do it. Thank you.
You bet.
Take care.